Hi, welcome back to Module 1 of the Analysis Fact-Checking Academy, into the third section where we're going to talk about ethical standards. So we're going to talk about some things surrounding non-partisanship and impartiality, privacy and safety, as well as honest corrections. So a fact-checking organization should follow a number of ethical standards, and these cover areas like non-partisanship and impartiality. And these kind of standards provide a guidebook on how to protect your independence, but also enhance your credibility as a fact checker. So there are several established fact-checking networks, such as the International Fact-Checking Network, IFCN, or the European Fact-Checking Standards Network, EFCSN. And these networks provide a number of suggested guidelines that can be adapted for your organization and work. And it's also important to note that in order to become a signatory of the IFCN or the EFCSN, you must provide adherence to their specific guidelines. So this set of guidelines that we're going to talk about in this module are kind of example guidelines that are commonly found as part of standards expected by organizations like the IFCN or EFCSN. And these sort of are very broadly about sort of maintaining your editorial freedom and political independence, refraining from endorsing or advising support for parties or candidates, avoid forming partnerships with political parties, and to ensure that you have a balanced focus in fact checks and investigations across parties and ideologies. So, broadly on non-partisanship and impartiality, you're looking at policies that kind of ensure that your organization or work is transparent and is safeguarded against potential conflicts of interest, which can arise if you are potentially occupying dual roles. So it's really integral that fact checkers maintain a clear boundary between their professional responsibilities and any potential political affiliations that staff might have, for example. This helps to ensure the integrity of your work and the wider fact-checking process. And sort of by prohibiting dual roles, you are really ensuring that you serve the public and that your role is about the public's trust in your work, your impartiality and commitment to serving the community above all else. And in your work as a fact checker, you will rely on experts and other trustworthy people and organizations. So if there is a conflict of interest, it's really vital to declare that in order to maintain your credibility, objectivity, and trustworthiness, and sort of identifying and transparently disclosing any potential conflicts of interest upholds the integrity of your work. And this can be something like when you're consulting with experts, sometimes you can get experts on sort of opposing sides of an argument, of an opinion. And so you're kind of making sure that you're working with sort of both cases of an argument. You can have things like internal policies prohibiting employees from making partisan statements on behalf of the organization. These are all really about preserving your neutrality, preserving your nonpartisan representation, preventing external perceptions of political bias, ensuring consistent messaging that's aligned with the fact-checking organization's missions and values. And it's also kind of like providing guidelines for managing personal advocacy or views. It's providing clarity on acceptable boundaries between personal and professional conduct, or balancing employees' rights to personal expression with the organization's reputation and objectives as a fact-checking organization. So it's about developing a series of guidelines. This is a discussion that you should have with your team. This is also something that you should look at with the IFCN or EFCSN and sort of look at kind of the general sort of framework that fact checkers operate in. Because as a fact checker, you can't be known or seen as advocating for a political orientation or a political opinion or a certain kind of, viewpoint. And this is really quite important. So you can have guidelines that basically say if someone, an employee of the fact-checking organization is making a statement, some statements are made in the organization's name, but some statements are personal opinions. But ideally, it's probably better to not have fact-checkers making, widely known personal opinions, because it can affect the reputation and the view of the organization as well. And developing kind of internal policies and guidelines that prohibit the acceptance of gifts or favors or services. These are all about maintaining your impartiality, maintaining your nonpartisanship, and fostering a culture of accountability and transparency with the public. An important part of this is that when you develop your nonpartisanship policies, so when you come up with your list, as you've seen in the previous slide, of things that the organization and employees can't do, you should make available and easily accessible on your website your non-partisanship policies so that people can see exactly what your policies are as an organization. And importantly, and this is really critical to the mission of fact-checking, you should only advocate for issues that are relevant to the public mission of fact-checking and are compatible with a reputation for independence and impartiality. So it's very important that you're not seen as a political entity that's targeting, for example, one particular political ideology. And this is really integral to making sure that you appear and that your work is kind of outside of the realms of being perceived as politically motivated or targeted. Now, this is also important when it comes to things like privacy and safety. So on the first point, you can see take measures to avoid exposing the source or identity of user-generated misinformation or disinformation. This is because a lot of times on social media, if you choose a claim that's on social media, it can be really widespread. So it's not a good idea to say, okay, there's this one person on Facebook, for example, who spread this claim. Usually the claim has been spread by many other people. And in Module 5, you'll also see how other fact-checking organizations kind of do this. So then you also have things like you need to be quite restrictive when mentioning minors or protecting their identity. This is not something that's going to come up very often, or it might never come up, but it's something that you need to think about as well when you're publishing fact checks. Additionally, the third point kind of comes into the first point as well. It's about anonymizing personal information that could allow for the harassment of people. So making sure that you conceal identities, making sure that you don't dox people, for example. And the last point, you should always be looking for right of reply. This is very important. You should always ask the person who's made the claim, if in the case it's a politician, for example, if they would like to reply to their claim. If it's in the case of social media, this is usually not necessary because the claim is so widespread that many people are making it, or alternatively, the claim is quite small and doesn't have enough traction, so it doesn't kind of fit the values of newsworthiness that we talked about in the previous section. Also, something that's quite important is that you need to think about measures that address the risk of trauma or harassment that can be experienced by your staff, because unfortunately this is something that can happen, particularly if a fact-checking organization is perceived as political in some capacity. So you need to talk about what services you can offer to other fact-checkers in your organization to sort of protect their mental and physical health. Now, another point is on honest corrections, because we all make mistakes, and this is just something that happens. So correcting mistakes is really something quite important. So this means that, once you're made aware of a mistake, you correct it promptly and you explain the correction with the note in the same publication. But in the case where the error is only grammatical or stylistic, you don't need to publish a note. But if it's something more more into the actual verification or into the actual fact check and the analysis, then you need to make it known. If for some reason it's not possible to edit the original publication, you should try and disseminate a correction in the same format and channel as the original. So on the website, if for whatever reason it's not possible to edit the article, you need to publish a new article saying that we made a mistake and clearing up that mistake. If a mistake is really substantial and it changes the overall conclusions of the investigation, or is really a clear departure from your established methodology and policies, you then need to take an additional step. So the first step you would do is you include the accurate information, so you correct the mistake, and then you also need to publish an additional note or an additional piece of information that explains the circumstances that allowed the error to occur. So you need to include that as well. You should also acknowledge the addition of new information in your investigation. So you publish a fact check, for example, and then new information comes to light. You should then, in your fact check, say new information has become available, which may or may not change the interpretation of the fact check, may change the investigation. So you should also update this. Also, very importantly, you need to create and make available a corrections policy, as well as a record of corrections on your website. This is very important because these kinds of openly available policies and openly available corrections on your website or organizational website serve to enhance your integrity, serve to enhance your authenticity, serve to enhance your impartiality and nonpartisanship, because people should see that you have a very clear A, fact-checking methodology, B, your entire kind of ethical standards have been thought about as a team, and that you can be held accountable to the standards that you've set as a team. Now, mistakes do happen, and there is a good example of a mistake in the next slide, where you see an image from the Babylon Bee, and the Babylon Bee is kind of like The Onion-esque satirical news website, but from the perspective of, conservative American Christians. So in 2018, Snopes fact-checked an article from this satirical site, the Babylon Bee, and it joked about CNN purchasing industrial-sized washing machines to spin the news. So why is this kind of, a mistake? Why is this kind of problematic? Well, for two reasons. One, the Babylon Bee very clearly says in its articles and on its website that it's a satirical page and that it's not, actual commentary about things. And by treating, by Snopes treating this as if it was, an actual real thing, what it does is it leads to criticism of both Snopes as an organization, but also criticism of fact-checking as a whole. And this is quite important because you shouldn't be fact-checking satire. You shouldn't be drawing attention to things that are obviously, a joke. And by doing so, what happens is you actually undermine the credibility of real fact-checking efforts. So that was this section on ethical standards. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next section.